Welcome to Nostalgia Basketball Series 1, Episode 4, the 2016-2017 NBA season playoffs. I was going back and forth on, did I want to do an Eastern Conference playoffs and then a Western Conference playoffs, like I did with the Eastern Conference and Western Conference regular seasons? But I think I came to the decision of, let's combine them. Let me tell the story about both sides, because it does lead to a conclusion where, well, we all know what happens. If you've already seen this and already seen the other three parts of this series, you know the drill. It has been a while since I've done a Nostalgia Basketball episode, but I wanted to get right back into it. If you're new here, welcome to Nostalgia Basketball. This series is built on looking at the past, the recent past of basketball, and celebrating it. This is about exploring hoops from a perspective of what happened in the last, let's say, around 10 years that a lot of people don't talk about anymore, or things that we can teach new hoop fans. This is Son of a Sports. Let's just dive into the past. All right, let's start with the first round of the playoffs, and the number 1 seeded Boston Celtics against the 8 seeded Chicago Bulls. In game 1 of the series, the Bulls put on a show, and they beat the first seeded Boston Celtics in a game that shocked a lot of people. But game 2 is in TD Garden still. What is Boston going to do? They lost again. Going into game 3, they went into Chicago, but there was something that happened. The Bulls lost Rajon Rondo, and didn't look like he was going to come back for the rest of the series. Led to a Bulls loss. Game 4, Bulls loss. So series is tied 2-2. They're going back to Boston. Boston wins. They finally went on home court. Game 6 of the series is in Chicago. This Bulls team does not look like the same Bulls team that won game 1 and game 2. They blow it. They just look like the Bulls team from before March. This team did not have chemistry. They weren't fitting well. Dwayne Wade, Jimmy Butler, Rajon Rondo. The team just wasn't working out, and it led to a collapse. It sucked, but Bulls fans knew this is time to move on. And with Boston, there were a lot of questions going in the next round, but it looked like that they finally won. All right, let's move on to the West. First seeded Golden State Warriors against the 8 seeded Portland Trailblazers. I talked about my Western Conference video, the acquisition of Yusuf Nurkic, Damian Lillard going off, CJ McCollum blossoming into a young star. It didn't really work out. Golden State was the best team of all time, and I think most of y'all know that. Golden State won in 4 games. They dominated in 4 games. This was probably the most boring series of the playoffs. Actually, there's more boring series. But, yeah, I mean, Golden State just did not make it easy. They just dominated. And going back to the East, the 4th seeded Washington Wizards against the 5th seeded Atlanta Hawks. As I talked about in my Eastern Conference video, Dwight Howard was a part of the Atlanta Hawks, and they were a team that, was surprising people early in the year, but they were not the same team. And this Washington Wizards team, I don't know if this is a hot take. This is probably just a normal take. This is the best iteration they had in the John Wall era, and John Wall was just too good for him. Bradley Beal was too good for him. This playoff run literally got Otto Porter paid a ton of money that they had to ship him out the next year. Atlanta just had Paul Millsap, and that was really it in this series. It was Paul Millsap against everyone else in Washington, and Washington came out on top in 6. Then moving on to the West, let's talk about the 3rd seeded Houston Rockets against the 5th seeded Oklahoma City Thunder. I know I'm switching up with the seeds here, but I want to talk about some, series that excited people. Russell Westbrook was coming off an MVP, and James Harden was second in MVP. So, yeah, I mean, it was close. These two teams, these were one-man shows with a supporting cast around them. Well, clearly the man with the supporting cast was going to win. James Harden's supporting cast was way better than Russell Westbrook's supporting cast that year, and they dominated. Russell Westbrook has a lot of flaws in the playoffs, but I'm genuinely going to give him a pass for this one. This team was not well constructed whatsoever, and James Harden and company beat him in 5. All right, moving back to the East, let's talk about Cavs Pacers. 2nd seeded Cleveland Cavaliers against the 7th seeded Indiana Pacers. And as I talked about, Paul George was on a run. But with Cleveland, their defense just sucked. That was known league-wide. Their defense was one of the worst in the NBA. But no LeBron James team, in his prime at least, I think he's still very freaking good, it's going to be bottom of the league in offense, and they were the top. They were a historic offensive team that is only going to be overshadowed by the other historic team in this season. And in this series, Indiana made it close in game 1. Game 2, In game 3, they were going off. They were dominating Cleveland in Indiana. It looked like, okay, this is the time they're going to make it a series. They're going to shock people. Then quarter 3 starts. Cleveland makes an adjustment, doesn't play Kyrie as much. I think they played him around 7 minutes in that quarter. And they didn't play him much in quarter 4. And Cleveland comes back down 36, something like that, and wins by 5. In a LeBron James-led run where him, Kyle Korver, I think Kevin Love for a bit, just shooters all around him, just went and dominated Indiana. LeBron had like 40-something. It was unreal. They go into game 4. It's close again, but it's a sweep. This Cleveland team, there are questions, but not in this series. Going back to the West, Jazz Clippers. And if I talked about this already, I don't know. This Jazz team was different. They had Gordon Hayward and Rudy Gobert, yeah, but they were finally like themselves. Rodney Hood was a good role player next to them. Joe Ingles. And All-Star Gordon Hayward just took it to a Clippers team that was falling apart every other game. Specifically CP3 and Blake Griffin, who both had series-ending injuries that led to the end of the Lob City era. This was a Rudy Gobert and Gordon Hayward squad that just took it to him in 6 games and ended the run that ended a team that a lot of people were expecting a championship out of when they formed. Final series to talk about in the East, Bucks Raptors. And Giannis Antetokounmpo is an incredible player, an incredible athlete, and he goes on to be a 2-time MVP, an NBA champion, a defensive player of the year. He wasn't there yet, and this Milwaukee team was not there yet. They were not very good around him. Chris Middleton was good, but that's really it, and they get squashed in 5. This Memphis series against the Spurs was the end of the grit and grind era in terms of playoff contention, and it was a lot of fun to watch. This was the best you were going to get out of Kawhi in San Antonio in terms of his offensive performance and being healthy for a full series, and I enjoyed every second of it. Going to 7 games, this is a really forgotten series, but I really enjoyed it. This was the end of the Gasol-Conley experiment in Memphis in terms of their playoff contention. Like, they had like 3 more years together, but this was really it, and it was a lot of fun to watch. All right, round 2. Let's start with Cleveland, Toronto. 2nd seed versus 3rd seed. Yeah, man, if you want to go watch a series where you're just like, watch LeBron toy with people, not like LeBron like had like insane clutch moments, which I'm not saying he's not clutch. He is. I'm not saying like go find LeBron be special. No, I'm saying watch LeBron treat grown men, grown NBA players like they're little kids. It's this series. Toronto got PJ Tucker, traded for Serge Ibaka to build this defense that could take on LeBron after LeBron beat him in 6 the previous year. Did not faze him. Beat him in 4. He said, all right, I'm going to beat you in 4. Him, Kevin Love. If I look back on the series, I remember Kevin Love a lot. And you got to watch the tape because it's so much fun to watch LeBron just like all the people that say he doesn't have a bag. This series, he just pulls one out. It's really freaking funny. Moving on to the West, Golden State, Utah. Again, I think every Golden State series until the end is boring because they just take it to you. They just dominate. They make it unfair. There's no challenge for them. There's no challenge. When Steph talks about it in a podcast in like 5 years when he's retired, he's going to say there was no challenge. Celtics Wizards. And my heart goes out to Isaiah Thomas for this series all the time. Losing your sister, having Boston medical staff telling you it's okay to take these shots in your hip to play. He did it for Boston. And you see it in his play in this series. John Wall does it for his love of Washington, and you see the dog John Wall is. This is the height of Washington, of the John Wall, Bradley Beal era. But IT, man, he was too good for him. What he did in that series in 6 games. I'm pretty sure the Wizards, it was either Wizards or the Celtics that wore all black, like they were going to a funeral, like they were going to put him out. This series was toxic, man. This was a rivalry. This was a fun series. Not for in terms of basketball. And let me just say that. watching IT go through what he went through with his sister, losing his sister, playing for her, that was heartbreaking. And then finishing off with the West. This series, I love this series in terms of basketball. There are some high highs, but I mean, you walk away from this series and you don't see the same player that you wanted to see in Kawhi. Spurs Rockets. This is probably James Harden's worst series of his career. Maybe other than like 2019. That was embarrassing. But this one's embarrassing too. 40-year-old Manu Ginobili blocking James Harden, who had 11 points. In Game 6, Kawhi doesn't even play, and Harden just puts on a stinker and loses it. Like, this was the worst choke job Harden's probably ever had. It was disgusting. And yeah, Spurs came up on top. They went to the conference finals. And James Harden's season where he was second in place for MVP ended there. Let's just talk about the conference finals first. Cavs Celtics. Game 1, IT plays. Cleveland still comes out on top. IT doesn't play for the rest of the series. Cleveland looks like they're just primed to sweep through the Eastern Conference, make the finals, and go against the one team that they knew was going to be there at the end. But I think I saw LeBron's worst game. The worst game I've seen LeBron play live. Game 4 of this series. The Avery Bradley game. Man, it's funny because like random niche things about this, like this, are why I do this series. I love LeBron, but watching Avery Bradley go off and just like have to put Boston on his back just for one more game. That's what basketball is all about. Doing it for the love of the game. Doing it because you love to dribble the basketball. And that's what Avery Bradley did. He really, really played well in this game. LeBron, after a historic start to the playoffs, slowed down. He wasn't himself in this game. But then Game 5 happened, and Cleveland went home and won. Or Cleveland won, sent Boston home. It sucked for IT because it was clear the shots weren't working anymore. His hip injury was too far gone, and they couldn't push it anymore. For Cleveland, it felt like that they had one more ghost waiting for him. And let's finish off the Western Conference with Golden State, San Antonio. Game 1, if you remember this, San Antonio was up by a lot, by over 20. But Zaza Pachulia, man. That man is the devil. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The way he knocked Kawhi down, the way he hurt Kawhi, and it's not the injury that led to Kawhi being hurt long term. But man, he purposely hurt Kawhi, acted like that was a crazy thing for fouling. Like he was like, the ref was crazy for fouling, calling that a foul. And we didn't see Kawhi for the rest of the series. San Antonio couldn't put up a fight. Golden State went to the finals with 0 losses in the Western Conference. At least Cleveland had one. And Cleveland was weaker. It's just the East did not have an answer for LeBron. Golden State just looked unstoppable. Unstoppable. And finally, to end the playoffs, who else? Cleveland, Golden State. And I think this series can be defined as by the quote LeBron said going into this series. I don't even want to think about Golden State right now. And it was for a good reason. Golden State dominated this series. Game 1 was fun to watch. It was electric to start. LeBron had that huge dunk on JaVale McGee. They look like they can go toe for toe. Golden State comes out and wins it. Game 2, okay. Cleveland's down 2-0. Cleveland came back down 3-1 the previous year. Kevin Durant blew a 3-1 lead the previous year. But man, this was a different juggernaut. And you can criticize LeBron for Game 3. A lot of people did. A lot of the national media did at this time, and I don't blame him. LeBron definitely had a rough fourth quarter in Game 3. It was winnable. Kevin Durant went and hit that huge shot over LeBron. And it just, you felt the air come out of Cleveland. You felt the air come out of the league. Everyone was like, holy crap, if this guy can't beat Golden State, this guy who is a fully healthy team, he has his guys around him. He has Kyrie, Kevin Love. They traded for Kyle Korver, and Kyle Korver is not the same Kyle Korver from before. They got Tristan Thompson paid. They got J.R. Smith paid. By the way, side tangent. Look it up. I'm pretty sure Steph Curry out-rebounded Tristan Thompson in this series. I will never forget that. Oh my God, Tristan Thompson. Sorry, back to talking about this. You just felt it across the league in that moment. You felt the air leave. You felt everyone realize this team is unstoppable. Golden State, like all the concerns about Steph closing games, well, you got Kevin Durant right there. And I'm not one of those guys that's like, we need a closer. We need a guy that can be the clutch of the clutch. But you had everything you needed. Draymond won Defensive Player of the Year. Clay was this hot scorer that is one of the best 3-and-D guys of all time. The ultimate role player in an all-star form. If you made a role player an all-star, that's Klay Thompson. Steph Curry is Steph Curry. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. You got Iguodala off the bench. Sean Livingston still giving you good basketball reps. There's no beating them. There was no beating this team. Game 4, Cleveland put on the best shooting performance of all time in a finals series to win it. And you're seeing the similarities now. I'm not saying Boston's near where that Golden State team was in terms of how unstoppable they are. We saw Boston 2 years ago struggle against Miami. And this is not the same Boston team. There's Drew Holiday. Jason Tatum's better. Jaylen Brown is better. They have Kristaps Porzingis now, even if he's been hurt. But regardless of all that, it took the Mavericks having an unreal Game 4 to even give them a chance to win. And that's basically what Cleveland had to do. They hit the most threes in like a finals game ever. In a playoff game ever, I think. It wasn't enough because Game 5, LeBron... you can go watch Game 5. Game 3, yes, LeBron disappeared for a moment. But Game 5, you ever see LeBron want it more than anyone else out there? It's that game. He wanted it more than anyone else. Kyrie turnovers, J.R. Smith turnovers. Kevin Love was a no-show in the finals, and I'm not gonna say of course, but he struggled a lot in the playoffs in Cleveland, except against Toronto. It feels like, and this final they were just outmanned, outgunned, outmatched. LeBron was very clearly the best player in this finals. Averaged a triple-double. First player to really do that in the finals, other than like Magic Johnson. Kevin Durant won Finals MVP with 35 points per game. Deservingly so. He was unstoppable. He was incredible. Cleveland couldn't do anything. Cleveland's lack of defense that showed in the regular season just really came to light in this series. Cleveland's special offense showed in Game 4. That's the only way they were staying in these games, especially in Game 3 and Game 4. Game 5 was close, and it was mostly just LeBron going head first, just trying and trying and trying and trying. I'll never forget holding ESPN on my phone, looking at the TV, as LeBron was really trying to keep him in the game. It wasn't enough. Yeah, I talked about this entire offseason, going into the year, talking about the Eastern Conference, Western Conference. And I know it took a while to come back and talk about nostalgia basketball in the playoffs because that's the closer of this series, or Series 1. 100% I'll come back and work on nostalgia basketball again because this series has been my most successful thing. This is what has worked so far on my YouTube. But I love talking about this. I love talking about the past in basketball because you see the similarities today. Because it teaches hoopers about things that they want to learn. When I was a kid, and I'm 20 years old now, but when I was a kid in 2016, I loved hearing about the Spurs Heat finals because I barely got to see it. And I barely got to remember it. I loved seeing clips of it. I loved watching full games of it. LeBron going back against Boston in Game 6. I love watching my Mavericks win a finals. That was the one memory I have as a kid. And it took me years to remember that again, to really realize what I was seeing. Like, this is why I do what I do, because basketball deserves to always be talked about, because sports history is always there. I hope you enjoyed this first series, and I hope that you'll come back to watch me talk about this again. Thank you. This is Son of a Sports, and I'll catch y'all next time.